All right. Welcome to this week's installment of the Religious Treehouse. I am your co-host, Matthew.
And I'm your other co-host, Jody. And boy, do we have an episode for you.
Oh, yeah, no, this week we're talking about Esther, and I'm so excited. One of my favorite stories in the Hebrew Bible. But before we get started, how's your week been? What have you been up to?
I've been feeling a little sick, and there was frost on the ground this morning, and I don't totally vibe with that. Like, I love the cold, but when it starts getting really cold, I get unhappy. How about you?
Yeah, no, I get it. We're on the opposite side of the country, but it's been like getting really cold here, and it's like been raining all day today. Not the vibes at all. But it's getting later in the year, so it's what we have to come to expect.
We don't control the weather, and if we would, I don't know. I think I'd make it rain all the time. I have to be honest.
Oh, cool. So do we want to start, Esther, with one of your summaries?
I think we do. Opening up, there's this queen, Queen Vishta. She's fabulous. She's wonderful. And she's not going to get talked about a lot. Yes.
What's her name?
Vishta? Is it not?
Vashti.
Vashti.
Vashti. Vashti.
Vashti. I'm terrible with names. Queen Vashti. She's wonderful. She's beautiful. She's so beautiful. The king's like, hey, I'm throwing this massive party. You should come to this party and wear the royal crown and only the crown. And she's like, no. So he's like, you gotta leave. You're gonna make all the other women disobey their husbands. And then he holds this beauty pageant and he's like, I need a new queen, a new beautiful girl to wear the royal crown and sit by my side. And this girl, Esther, is encouraged by her cousin Mordecai. And so Esther goes, Esther wins. And then things take a turn because Mordecai upset a man, the right hand man of the king, Haman. And this guy was not going to have it. So he said, listen, I'm very petty. So I'm just going to kill your entire peoples because he knew that Mordecai was Jewish. And Mordecai had told Esther, keep it on the hush hush that you're Jewish. That we're just not going to talk about that. But then this happened, and Mordecai was like, hey, Esther, you're like the only one who can do anything. And she was like, bet, fast for multiple days I shall go in front of the king, which you're not supposed to do unless invited. And she's like, if I perish, I perish. Be that what it is. So she goes to the king and she's like, hey, I wanted to invite you to a dinner party. And so they have the dinner party. And then she's like, I invited you to this dinner party to invite you to another dinner party. And the entire time, Haman's in the background, like getting things together. He is the king sign an edict, like, on this day, you may kill a Jew. And wild, that is crazy, all over your dislike for one man. And then the king is like looking through his old scrolls because there had been a murder plot against the king by two eunuchs because they didn't have anything, so they had to murder the king. Um, Joke in my head. Anyways, so he and Mordecai had saved the king. And then the king found this out and was like, I should throw a parade for Mordecai for saving me. So he asks Haman, hey, how should I celebrate this person who saved my life? And Haman, thinking the king met him, was like, oh my God, you should throw a fabulous parade with all of the best things. It'll be wonderful, splendorous. And then he found out it was about Mordecai. How embarrassing. And then finally we get to the second dinner party. Esther's like, that man there is trying to kill all my people. The king was like, how dare you? Stormed out. Haman's pleading for his life. Please don't let him kill me. Please, please. Throws himself onto his sofa in dramatics. And the king comes in and he's like, are you trying to sleep with my wife? And Haman's like, no, no, man, no, no. And he's like, I don't believe you. Death with you. And then Esther's like, what can we do? And he's like, I can't revoke an edict. Like, it's out there. So it's just, and then she's like, what if? I can't remember who said it, but someone was like, what if we said the Jews could defend themselves and kill anyone who tried to attack them? So they sent that out. And then the day came and they had a celebration. It was one day if you were further out from the town, 2 days if you were closer. We'll get to that so you can say yes or no on if what I'm saying is correct? Um, and then they decided to do it again another day like that. I don't know. Was it one day or two? Anyways, Esther saved the Jews. Yay! And
Ooh.
that's how you get Purim.
That's how you get Purim. Yeah, no, 100%. Honestly, a great summary, and hit on many good, important parts. But before we like dive in and look at it, granularly, chapter by chapter, if you will, I feel like this is going to really be like your average Bible study, and I kind of hate that for us. We're just like, let's go chapter by chapter, but that's what we're going to do today, I guess. But because I feel like that's necessary. Like we need this grounding because Esther is like such this larger than life, amazing story, and it's one of my favorite ones to talk about because there's so many things that you know we can talk about it. So I'm hoping that Esther, our talks on Esther, kind of turn into a series where we can return to it because like the art dedicated towards Esther, the like ways it's been interpreted throughout the years, it's just so good. And if we ever talk about the Binding of Isaac, I think that one would also make
Okay.
another good series because there's so many things to talk about that with rabbinic literature. But that's beside the point. But before we kind of go deeper into Esther, I think what I really want to get across in our conversation today is the genre of Esther. And I think that comes across pretty clearly just by reading it. And I think your summary kind of showed that well also. Um, the fact that I think, with the Bible, a lot of, more fundamentalist religious people like to look at the Bible as a historical document. And I think more so than most other places in the Bible, this is clearly not meant to be history. Um, like I think the closest thing that we could call it in like our genres is like a satire or farce, where it's this comedic. Yeah, Jody.
I was just gonna say this is theater. This is
Yeah,
this is a play. This is the most theatrical piece of biblical text I have ever read, and I'm so sad it took this long for me to read it.
yeah. No, it's this comedic and dramatic telling of a story that uses caricatures and absurd situations that are it's supposed to be hilarious, like you're supposed to laugh. And I think that's really come through in the celebration of Purim. Like it really the carnivalesque celebration of Purim, I think really reflects how the story is told. Um, so I think that's going to come out really, really evidently as we read this. Um, but yeah, um, do you have any thoughts before? I'm sure I have tons of things to say, but I'm sure they'll come out as we go through it. Do you have any thoughts yet?
Um, it was my favorite biblical story growing up in church. Like when they turned on Veggie Tales and it was the Esther Veggie Tales, I went
Hmm.
wild. That was my shtick because Esther had brown hair and brown eyes, and I was like, oh my gosh, finally a heroine. Um, but also just this story of this courageous young girl, and it's such a strong female role model, and there wasn't a lot of those I felt being presented to me in the church. So
Hmm.
I Esther holds a very special place in my heart, so I'm very excited for this.
Yeah, no, this is great. Um, so sure, let's go. It's a short book, 10 chapters, 10 short chapters. Um, so chapter one, we've got King Ahasuerus throwing a party for his dudes. And then we've got Queen Vashti throwing a party for her girls. We've got two different parties. Was this the week long party or is this a 6 month long party? I think this was the 6 month party.
A
I don't know.
long time.
Big party time. What was that?
It was a long time and it was glamorous. The description in chapter one of this party, from the shiny linens to the blue hangings, purple and silver rings and marble pillars, and golden goblets to drink from, they spared no expense.
Yeah. No, this is your, and I think Ahasuerus can like really live up to this throughout the story. This is your really, really rich frat boy king.
Yeah.
Like King Ahasuerus is, you know, the ultimate frat boy who's got millions and millions of dollars, and he's just living his best life. Doing whatever he wants to do, not really making any choices on his own, just kind of being like, yeah, doing whatever the people around me have to say, I'm down for it. And we see this here. We're partying it up, and all the parties here, like food is rarely mentioned. Like these are drinking parties. This is a frat party. There's no food. We don't care about food. There's alcohol and alcohol only, and it's this, absurd story of just drunkenness, and there's just drinking and drinking and drinking. It's so funny, so much so that even in the Talmud, it says that when you celebrate Purim, you should drink so much that you can't tell the difference between blessed be Mordecai and cursed be Haman. And we'll get to those characters later, but it's like it's this festival of drinking. It's so exciting.
Okay, but wait, I can actually turn this retelling into a frat party. I should have summarized it as a frat party now that you said this, because this is frat president Ash.
Mhm. Yeah.
And did you
Yeah.
know fraternities have sorority sweethearts, and they actually have pageants to determine who the sweetheart of the sorority of the fraternity is. I'm sorry. It's a pop culture thing, but thinking of it like from the mind frame of what if this was happening on a college campus, I can see it.
Yeah.
They're playing beer pong. They have blown the budget for the parties for the year, and he is
Mhm.
wasted, and he's like, you should get my girlfriend to come out in only your crown.
Yeah. And when Heyman comes later, he's like the quarterback on the football team. He just thinks he's so good. Like this is like if I were to like retell the story, it would be in like a high school or college. Like that's how the vibes are.
That is wild.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, as we were saying, the king's like, hey, let me show off my queen Vashti. Like, come on, Vashti, come on over here. And we're gonna show off for like all my dude bros here. Um, and it has her wearing her crown, which, perhaps indicates that he's invited her to come out wearing only her crown, which, is how, the text kind of indicates that, and later interpretations have definitely indicated that. So we're definitely exploiting Vashti, and Vashti's not having any of it. She's like, no way, we're not doing this. So what do we do to someone who says no? Well, obviously, you ask your dude bros, and we're like, well, what do we do? We got to make something happen. So we exile Vashti, which probably meant we killed her. Um, I know
What?
it's sad. Poor Vashti.
What?
You think the king's just gonna let her wander around? No, based on the historical circumstances that this was written in, it's very much implied that she's dead.
That sucks. Okay?
Yeah,
Because, as a
like
woman, I love to show off my shiny things. And a woman would only say no to that request for two reasons. Number one, never let anyone boss you around. Number two, never show off your shiny things while naked. That is prime blackmail material. Like, so in my head, she probably had a perfectly good reason.
yeah,
But this is theater. This is theater.
but yeah, and it's this idea of like, oh no, what did she do? She's disrespected me. So the solution to like fix this faux pas is to send an edict out to the entire kingdom. This is told in the Persian setting. So this is the Persian king who ranges from essentially Egypt to India, big old area. So he sends out this edict and is like, men have control over their families. So he's just broadcasting this faux pas to like his entire kingdom of like, And so it's so funny how it just expands and gets so big and it's spread out. And it's the point. It's the point of this is to say, no, this is really extravagant, really extreme. What's going on here?
My brain is going, instead of king and an edict, it's a frat boy and an Evite.
Yeah, the frat boy, King Ahasuerus is posting all over his Instagram.
All over. He's like, don't let these thoughts control you.
Yeah.
Get it? It's a pun. Okay, so yeah, he's sending this out, and so they start rounding up girls, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we've lost the queen. We don't have a queen anymore because she's dead. So what we do is we say, "All right, beautiful ladies of Persia, come on over," and we gather them up in a harem. And for they have a year of beauty treatments, and I think it's really funny that we're calling this a beauty pageant because I don't. That's not really what the text is saying. The text is saying once a night he kind of checks out to see if he likes this girl, and whichever girl he calls back the most is probably going to be the king or the queen. So this is less so of a beauty pageant and more so of a who's the king's favorite.
Okay.
And Esther apparently was his favorite.
Okay, there are tryouts. It's a pageant. You try out for a pageant. I'm trying to wash this down to be digestible because if I think about this any other way, I'm gonna puke. Because
This is, yeah, I hate to break it to you, but VeggieTales has diluted the story a little bit. I assume. I
we'll get
assume
to that.
VeggieTales didn't have all this.
No, VeggieTales did not have all of this. But something interesting I found out is that they used myrrh in the beauty treatments, and myrrh is commonly used for skin tightening and wrinkle reducing. So
Interesting. Yeah.
I wanted
We're
to know
we're
what
make
beauty
we're
treatments look like.
yeah, it's this extravagant 1 year long worth of beauty treatments that's happening. Like it's again funny about how silly this is.
Yeah.
But here we're introduced to our main characters. We've got Mordecai and Esther. And I think Mordecai is introduced first, right? Um, yeah, chapter 2, verse 5. Now there was a Jew in the citadel of Susa whose name was Mordecai, son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjaminite. Um, which, this is often regarded and enjoyed by feminists. It's like, oh, this is a woman's book about a woman, which I, in like, cool, great. But I think we need to pay attention to how Esther is described. Throughout the book, she's given very little, agency of her own. She's always described in relation to Mordecai or the people around her. Outside of, the big scene between her and Haman, she doesn't really have much of a, she doesn't have a huge role. So calling this a feminist piece of work is, I would say that's a bit far. But I think these conversations and how it's been interpreted as such is why Esther is such a rich text and why I want to talk about it so much in future episodes. Um, but we are introduced to Mordecai, a Benjaminite, who notably King Saul was also a Benjaminite. Yes, Jody?
A Benjaminite means they're descended from Benjamin. I'm to
Right,
assume.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. So we've got the tribes of Israel, and you've got all the big old tribes doing their thing. And you've got your 12. One of them is the tribe of Benjamin. And for some reason, we haven't talked about tribes of Benjamin yet, and we're not talking about it anywhere in our near future, but we will get there at some point. Um, but yeah, you got Judah, you got Ishtar. No, not Ishtar. That's Esther. Um, that's a side tangent. But you've got these 12 tribes. Most famously, Saul is a Benjaminite, the first king of Israel, of the northern kingdom. Um, so we have this connection. This is a very Jewish text. Mordecai is the focal Jewish character, and he says, "Okay, Esther, you're going to do this. You're going to be in this beauty pageant, but be real sneaky about you being Jewish. We don't want to let that get out."
So they've been sneaky. They're like keeping her quiet. She's a Benjaminite, and she gets chosen. So, wait, what do we know why she has to hide her Jewishness? I mean, I guess I'm not understanding that.
Yeah, um, so clearly, as Mordecai's cousin or uncle or cousin, as sometimes it's interpreted as. Um, so she's clearly Jewish as well, and this was written for Jews in diaspora, so Jews away from Israel, who aren't in the political majority and are very, as we'll see with Haman, these are people who are spread out minorities and don't have any political power of their own, which is you know which is who this audience is for. The audience of this is for Jews in diaspora, and that means they don't have this political power. And that's the same in this story, where the minority is often looked down upon by these large kingdoms. Persia was, surprisingly generous and lenient with minority groups, which I think is kind of odd that they have, the Persian king being the big bad guy here, or the setting for the big bad guy. But yeah, it's a minority group, and in antiquity, you don't want to be the minority group.
Okay. And I won't do the whole how did they know they're virgins. I don't think I want the answer to that. I
Sure.
am reading the word second harem. So is it safe to assume the king has a first harem already at the castle?
Yeah, I mean, he's the king. He can do whatever he wants. He can have as many women as he wants, but he needs a queen. He needs his main queen. And like, we'll get to this in a few chapters where the king hasn't called Esther in a month or two, and that's probably because he's occupying himself with other women in these harems. So
What a frat
the king
boy.
keeps busy. The frat boy keeps busy.
Frat boy. Well, Mordecai just seems like a guy who wants to keep his job.
Yeah, Mordecai's down for business. He says we need to be focused. We need to get our stuff done. Don't fire me. um,
And then
but
we're
yeah,
introduced to Haman.
yeah, we're introduced to Haman, the big bad guy, in Purim, or during Purim, when this is um, read, when Esther is read. Um, Anytime Haman's name is spoken, you get these groggers, which are noisemakers, and you spin them around, and it blots out Haman's name. It's real fun.
And they
But
do that because he was such a bad guy.
yeah, because
And
we
like his
hate
name's
Haman.
kind of cursed.
Yeah, well, Haman is this bad guy. He's enemies of enemies. He's the guy who said, "Let's kill all the Jews in the Persian Empire," which at that time was all the Jews in the world. So we don't like Haman. Haman is the biggest bad guy that we have. So we blot out his name.
I can get down with that.
Yeah, but then as we're introduced to this, the king says, "All right, guys, bow down to Haman. Bow down to our Super Bowl, or not Super Bowl, quarterback." Yeah, I don't football terms. They're all the same.
Quarterback's good.
Um,
Our star quarterback.
yeah, bow down to our star quarterback Haman. And Mordecai's like, "No, I'm not going to do that." And as we know with star quarterbacks, that really upsets him. It really grinds his gears, as they say. Um, so in response, this is where Haman gets the idea of we should just kill all the Jews because Mordecai wouldn't bow down to me.
That is so embarrassing to not have the emotional regulation to handle rejection that you're like, I'm going to be so petty and just kill this man's entire people. Like,
Yeah,
that cringe.
yeah, yeah, and it's Um, and he's like, "Well, when are we going to do this?" So he casts a pur, which is like dice or lots, and the plural of that purim, which is how we get the name for Purim. Um, and he's like, "Oh, okay, it'll be on the 13th of Adar." The date has been set for the massacre of Jews. Cool. And then he asks the king, he's like, "Can we get this funded? Like, is this like, do we have money for this? We can make this work because genocide's expensive." So they do that. King, the frat guy is like, "Sure, do whatever. You're in charge." And then the edict goes out. Mordecai and Jews everywhere are really upset, obviously.
Yeah.
I would be upset too. This is something to be upset about.
Very upsetting. I mean, the man dresses himself in a sack, weeps at the palace gates, spreads ashes on himself, gets a crowd to join him. 'Twas a spectacle how the king did not notice. I must assume he was with his first harem. That's a lot of commotion to be making at the palace gate for the king to be like, life is good, I'm fine, nothing's wrong.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, also during this time, Esther seems to be oblivious to the situation. And we get this fun little back and forth between Esther and Mordecai, where they don't ever talk to each other, but they send this group of eunuchs back and forth to each other to like do these messages. It's really fun to think about if you read chapter 4 slowly. Just imagine this poor person going back and forth in this conversation.
They have
Um,
nothing else to
and
do.
Mordecai, yeah,
They have
and
nothing but
Mordecai's
time on their
like,
hands. He's like,
yeah,
thank
yeah,
God I'm still employed. As long as I'm
yeah,
working, I'm not dying.
yeah. Um, but Mordecai's like, "Here's the deal." Haman was like, "This is like, we're gonna kill everyone. We shouldn't do this. You got to figure this out." And Mordecai says, "Esther, like, even you'll get figured out. Like, you can't hide from this. We're all gonna die." And then Esther says, "Okay, we got to talk to the king. We got to talk to the king." And one of my favorite lines, she says, because you can't just approach the king, obviously. You can't just be like, "Oh, king, I have words for you." You have to be summoned in by the king. So she says, "If I die, I die." And it's just, the vibes. Love the vibes from Esther there. And we get to chapter 5.
Yep.
Esther's like, "Oh, we're so nervous. This is so scary. I gotta talk to this king. He's gotta, like, if he approves of this, he'll hold out his scepter and like let me touch it, and like it'll be all okay if he does that. But I'm so scared. I'm so scared. This is so scary. Ah!" And then she does it, and the king's like, "Of course, Esther. How's it going? It's so nice to see you. Like, oh my goodness, Esther, I love you so much. How have I gone so long without seeing you?"
No, he is such
And
a
it's
simp. Such a simp. And here's the time where I explain to you what a simp is. A simp is a man who would crawl, grovel on the ground for his woman. He just turns into a puddle of mush. The minute his woman, he just longs for her.
yeah.
But to not call her for a month. And then she
Yeah.
walks in, and you're like, "Hey, honey boo boo, how's my Pookie Bear? What do you want? What do you need? You want half the kingdom? It's yours."
Yeah.
This man.
No, it's so fun. And this is, I think one of the first times we see very clearly the reversal of what's happening. Like I think one of the biggest themes we have in Esther is this idea of reversals, where one thing happens and then the reverse happens. So, it's kind of a pivot point. Like, oh no, this is bad, and then all of a sudden, oh, this is like really good. Whatever. And we also see this as a pivot, as a reversal of Vashti, where the king calls Vashti and she won't come and is punished. Whereas here, the king doesn't call Esther, Esther comes, and Esther is rewarded. So we have this, very intentional literary structure of reversals happening. And we see this throughout the book. I'll point it out as I see more. But um, this is, a very, very good indicator that this is not meant to be historical. This is a very funny, very literary book. So good. So Esther says something along the lines of, "Oh, my sweet Ahasuerus, can I give you a feast? Can I give you a banquet? Can we do a little drinky party?" And Ahasuerus is like, "Of course, yes, we can. It'll be so good." And Esther says, "By the way, bring Haman." And Ahasuerus was like, "Sure, I'll bring my bro. Love that dude. He can come along." Haman, super hyped to be invited. He's with the one guy in the social structure that's above him, and with his girl, he just got invited to be with his best bro, and so he's hyped. They're so excited. And then the king's like, okay, at the party, the king says, "All right, Esther, what do you want? Tell me why you really have us here, my sweet love." And Esther says, "I don't want anything. Let's just throw you another party. Let's do another party tomorrow. And, bring Haman too. Like, he's here. He's having a good time. Bring him too." And it's great. They finish up their drinking party. They split their ways, but Haman sees Mordecai on his way home. Mordecai, how dare we? The guy who won't bow to me? And he's pissed. So he goes home to his wife and is like, "Can you believe what I just saw? By the way, I'm really cool. Had this really cool dinner with my best bro, King Ahasuerus. Really cool. Had a great time. I'm the best. But this guy won't bow to me. What do we do?" So his wife, Zeresh, says, "Why don't we murder him?" And Haman's like, "Such a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? Let's set up a 7-story tall gallows, and then we'll put Mordecai on it." And they're like, "Fantastic idea. This is great. So good."
This man is a raggedy,
Problem solved.
narcissistic dunderhead. I hate him. His wife is the worst. You just had a wonderful time at a party. And because you see him walking around, you're like, "You know what? We're already killing him and all of his people. What if we also?"
What if we take care of him a little earlier?
Like, you already have murder on the books. It is in your planner.
Yeah, the date has been set.
So impatient.
Ugh. So impatient. But yeah, I feel like I've talked a while. Do we have any thoughts so far?
No, I am telling you my thoughts as we're going. So
Good, good. So then that same night, King Ahasuerus, he can't sleep. Oh no. Our poor little frat boy king can't sleep. So, he's cuddled up in bed with his little teddy bear and he says, "Hello, my little court reporter person. Hello. Can you read me a bedtime story? Something that's really, really boring." Yeah.
the fact that I have seen this exact scene in a TV show, like a frat boy president having a pledge come into the room to read him a bedtime story, I am seeing this in my mind and I am cackling because he was probably all snuggled up, cozy, and he has a guy sitting next to him, and the guy's all like, "At 12:01, you ate a snack." Sorry, continue.
No, but that's exactly it. He's like, "Can you read the most boring thing that we have? Read our court records, please. That'll put me to sleep." And he's curled up with his teddy bear and his blankets and stuff. And it comes up that Mordecai, a few chapters ago that we didn't mention, Mordecai had spoiled an assassination attempt against the king because he heard 2 of his eunuchs at the gate plotting to kill the king. And Mordecai told Esther, and they canceled the plot. And the king, wide awake now, is like, "Oh my goodness, how are we celebrating this guy? What have we done to say thank you to this wonderful, wonderful person?" And the court reporter person's like, "Nothing. We haven't done anything." And then at this point, Haman comes in first, says, good morning, Mr. President." And Haman's like, "Oh my," or not Haman, King Ahasuerus is like, "Hey, my bro, if there's someone who's just so good, they've done such a really good thing, and we should just celebrate them. Like, what would you do? What would you do to celebrate them? And Haman at this point is like, oh, obviously he's talking about me. We just won the football game last night. I'm the best. Um, so he like tells like all of these great things to do for Mordecai. He doesn't know that yet. He says, dress him up in, the royal garments and all these things. And he's saying this because if what happens and Haman is dressed in this fancy way, it kind of makes him look like he's next in line to be king. He's kind of playing the role to be king, and it's really elevating his position even more than it already is. So Haman says all these things, and the king says, fantastic. I'll even give you the honor to tell Mordecai that he's this man. And Haman's like, what in the world? What are you talking about? This isn't me. It's so funny because he goes out so begrudgingly to Mordecai and is like, you're honored by the king, blah 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 blah. And there's this 14th century illuminated manuscript from Germany, I want to say, and it's so good. One of my favorite pieces of art ever. And it's Haman's daughter up in a castle who's like in the know of how much that we hate this guy. Mm-hmm. So she assumes it's Mordecai walking Haman to the king, and Haman on top of the horse or whatever it is they're riding. They think it's Haman up there, in all this fancy garb, and Mordecai walking beside him. So in this Bible, in this illuminated manuscript, they have Haman's daughter pouring poop, the toilet onto Haman's head. It's so funny. It's such a good picture. I wish I remembered what manuscript it was called. It's like the Leipzig manuscript from the Rhine or something. It was so funny.
No, that is so crazy. And also how embarrassing for Haman. Like, not that he didn't get a parade, but that he misunderstood. Like, when that happens to me, and I'm like, oh, I made an assumption it was about me and it wasn't about me. Like, when my husband's like, who's my little princess? And he's talking to the dog and not, in fact, me. That's what that feels like.
Yeah. But again, we have this big reversal here that Haman thinks he's going to be elevated, but it's actually Mordecai. And I really think this is the tipping point of the whole story. The whole story is like, at this point, kind of switches around. So that happens. We have any thoughts on that anymore?
I mean, chapter 6, he hurried home in mourning with his head covered, Haman did. And I think he should lock himself up at home and never be seen again. And then he talks to his wife. And his wife was very wrong to suggest the gallows for Mordecai, but also very right to say that if Mordecai is Jewish, Haman will not prevail against him, but will surely fall before him.
Yeah. So, obviously, we've got some foreshadowing there. Clearly, or foreshadowing, as this was written for diaspora Jews, like the bad guy's going to get taken care of, and it written for the people, like it's going to be good. Like they can't fight us because we're going to win, and it's this rallying cry. We see this reversal as we go into the rest of it, for sure. But yeah, chapter 7 comes along, and we get Esther's second banquet. And we do the same niceties. Oh, my king, I love you so much. You're so good. And the king's again like, oh, I'll give you up to half the kingdom. This is just so good. And then the king's like, but like, what do you want? What do you want? And Esther is like, all right, cards on the table. There's this edict that's been put out that is like set to massacre all of my people. And the king is like, who did this? What is this? How have I not heard of this? Who is this? And Esther says, a foe, an enemy, this wicked Haman. And it's like so good in art, and it's always like with Esther pointing at Haman, and it's this, it's so good, such a good scene. And the king in his fury, is like, oh, how horrible. And he walks out of the room, take a breather. And at this point, Haman says, Esther, please save my life. Please save my life. And he like trips and falls and lays himself on Esther's bed, which is a big no-no because this is when the king walks back in. And the king's like, you're trying to sleep with my wife now? Off with your head. One of the best lines, seven in RSV, I'm reading out. Um, chapter 7, verse 8. As the words left the mouth of the king, they covered Haman's face. That's just so good. That's just some quality writing right there.
Yeah.
Um, so the king freaks out and is like, how are we going to kill this guy? And someone pipes up, is like, hey, we have this like 7-foot tall gallows. It's not really doing anything. We can, impale him on that. And the king says, fantastic, sounds like a plan. And our horrible Haman is now dead.
Yay!
Yay! And again, we have this reversal here. The gallows was made to impale Mordecai, but actually it impales Haman.
No, that's justice served. That is his comeuppance.
Yeah.
That is what should have been done. And I stand a king who's like, you were on my lady's bed, you must die. Like, how dare you soil her? Ugh. So then Esther's talking to the king and she's like, what can we do? And she finds out he can't rescind the edict.
Mm. Yeah. We get Mordecai raised up to Haman's position, which again is another reversal happening. And they're like, okay, how do we solve this problem? Because a king can't reverse an edict. I've heard multiple scholars say different things about this. I've heard some say, yeah, this is a common thing. Like, you can't reverse edicts because then the next king could come around and just like reverse the reversal thing. But I'm more convinced by this just being a literary foil. Like, oh no, this is a problem. Like, what are we doing here? How do we solve this? And the solution is that a new edict is sent out where Jews are allowed to defend themselves and fight back on this day. And, comes and goes. Jews kill, 500 in Susa. And then they kill, it's a 2-day fight, I think, if I remember. They kill 500 in Susa on day 1, 300 in Susa on day 2, including all 10 of Haman's children, which is another fun picture in a lot of illuminated manuscripts. And then they also kill 75,000 other people in the kingdom. So we've replaced, one genocide with the massacre, which, problematic for many reasons. If you could let me speak on behalf of the podcast here, on behalf of the religious treehouse, we'd like to come out and say 3 things. 1, murder is bad. 2, genocide is bad. And 3, massacre is bad. And you can quote me on that.
Yeah, I feel comfortable with that.
Okay, cool. But I think what's happening here, if we want to look past the horrible, horrible things happening and read it in its context for who it was written for, as this was not a historical event, this was much more giving a story of hope and a story of for Jews in diaspora who are spread out and without power, to have the story that they can look up to of a Jewish queen, and their people rise up in power and strength. It can be, a very powerful and impactful message that can bring comfort and joy to people. And we see this throughout history. It's a common trope that you can't go, a decade, a century without without massacre or threat of death to like the anti-Semitic nature of history is so prevalent. And reading this throughout the centuries has really given, I think, comfort to a lot of Jews in exile, in minorities, who are all too aware that death could come. We saw this perhaps most evidently during the Shoah, the Holocaust. Um, so this is a very powerful story, even if we don't like the massacre.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot more to be said about that, a whole lot more. But
Yeah, no,
yeah, what are your thoughts?
I think reading this now, it gives me such a different view of the story I learned as a child. And we'll get to the VeggieTale interpretation, but uh, it's I mean, I think the heart of what I felt is still there because she had to be very courageous to go in front of the king
Mhm.
and to stand up for her people. And I think that is truly the heart of what like holding Esther up is like to
Yeah,
have courage in the face of these very difficult decisions. Um, I mean, I don't know. My heart just breaks because to think
yeah,
that like this story is it does give comfort, but at the same time, my tummy still hurts. And Connor made the
yeah.
it, Connor, I was telling the story to Connor, and he was like, "It kind of sounds like The Purge," and it kind of clicked in my head, and I was like, "Per, one day, Purge." Um, that just stuck there, but yeah, no, I think this is truly I want to see this in a stage production. I want to see more
Mm,
interpretations of Esther in
yeah.
movies.
And it's one of the most reproduced stories of the Bible. It's like one of the most in film. There's tons of films out there, a lot of them older, but One Night with the King. Um, I think is that Charleston Heston. I don't know of that era.
Yeah.
There's so many, and this is why I want to talk about this again because there's so much more that we didn't get into. And like this all acts as an etiology, as a story to explain how Purim is a holiday that's still celebrated. So like there's so much more to be said about this that and I think if Andrew Lloyd Webber were to make another biblical musical, he has Joseph and Jesus Christ Superstar, like his next musical should be Esther. Like I think he has the skills to make it interesting. I'd love to see that.
That would be phenomenal.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Put me in, coach. I'm ready. It's my time.
Yeah.
Let's maybe not go biblically accurate because I'm assuming Esther was a child bride.
Yeah, yeah, well, it's not really ever never said how old Esther is, and I'd like to imagine that she's older, but that's just
Okay.
because I would like to imagine it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think. Oh my goodness, there's so much that should be still be said that I didn't get to say. I will say that God is not mentioned anywhere in Esther. There's no mention of God, um, and there's no prayer or anything. The closest we get to religiosity is fasting and stuff like that. So it's a fairly secular text, which the Greek version inserts God into, which is a later insertions, which we'll talk about some other time, I'm sure. And it's also notably the only book of the Bible where no fragments have been found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. Um, so either the Essenes of the Dead Sea Scrolls didn't celebrate Purim, they had something against the secularity, the Esther being so secular, or for some reason all of the manuscripts have been destroyed. But it's something of note. Every April Fool's Day, there's some religious website article that comes out with Esther documents just found in Qumran, and it's always an April Fool's joke. It's one of those Bible scholar jokes that we love to see.
That is so funny and just so on brand for you at the same time. Like that's the April Fool's joke. I mean, I love intelligent April Fool's jokes, so I'll be looking forward
Yeah.
to that next year.
But yeah, that's all I have to say about Esther, I suppose, for now. But I hear VeggieTales has a fun version, and I'm sure I watched it as a child, growing up in the same church as you, but I couldn't tell you the first thing about it. Would you like to tell us about VeggieTales Esther?
Oh boy, would I. First of all, if you haven't seen it, go to YouTube. It's free. Get yourself some goldfish crackers because that's how I watched it the very first time. Was sitting in front of a screen. I had goldfish. Of course, I was paying attention. So just so everyone knows, VeggieTales is for ages 4 to 11. And I was trying to keep that in mind while writing my notes on this. But one thing I will say is that they never use the word Jew. They never acknowledge, they just say that Esther's family is who is being threatened. So, and I just want to say that VeggieTales holds a special place in my heart because the lessons I learned through the stories will live through my actions for the rest of my life. That being said, okay, we open up the king. He has a question for the queen. The question was, make me a sandwich. I'm not even kidding you. And she says no, and so he banishes her.
Okay.
The murder
Okay.
attempt on the king involved 2 peas, 1 piano, and a cake.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's very interesting. I'm that one was specifically for you because I'm like I want to tell you about it, but I also want you to watch it.
Wait. So we're not okay with talking about, murdering a bunch of people, but we will murder the king? Like that is on the table?
Yeah, no, they weren't like
Okay.
they wouldn't say because that's the thing. And then when the peas are found out, they're not sentenced to death, they're sentenced to the Isle of Perpetual Tickling.
Sure. Yeah. You
And
know.
and and when you look at Esther and the king is this old zucchini with white hair, and Esther's kind of being portrayed as like a girl. Like it says a girl's
Yeah.
courage on the thing. So it's definitely showing an age difference. So they're
Mhm.
okay with showing that, but they're not okay with saying the word
Okay.
Jew.
Sure. But presumably to like relate to the little girls watching, like
Yeah,
I can be courageous too. Yeah.
yeah. And then in it, Mordecai was scared of Haman, but maybe that was to show the depth of Haman's power, like how powerful he was. But Mordecai
Mhm.
like cowered. He wouldn't kneel, but he cowered. And in this, they really gave Esther personality. She was a very, 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 very reluctant bride. She wanted
Sure.
nothing to do with this. Also, she behaved like a teenager, which made the marriage kind of weird. And I honestly had that thought when I viewed this the first time about 20-ish years ago. Um, and so they use the same vegetables or fruits to signify who's like a family in this. And it's worth
Mhm.
pointing out that Mordecai and Esther were different vegetables. What vegetables they were, I'm
Interesting.
not sure, but they were different vegetables. Um, there is so they do truly do a beauty pageant. Like they have like contestant girls come up, and
Mhm.
Esther was Miss Babylon. And so she had a sash.
That okay. Interesting that they would choose Babylon as where Esther's from.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Special mention for the puppy song. One of the contestants sings about how if she were queen, she would rescue all the lost puppies. And the
Of course.
dramatic sing along I held for Connor because he watched it for the very first time. He has never seen VeggieTales. It is the only
Mhm.
way he wants to learn the Bible now. He's
Yeah,
like,
well, I think yeah.
it's so entertaining. There was a Michael Jackson reference.
Topical for when this was
Topical.
made. Yeah.
Again, it doesn't shy away from pop culture references, won't say the word Jew.
Yeah, I think with I don't know a lot of the online people talking about that's not biblically accurate. That's not what happened in the Bible, especially with modern stuff.
Yeah.
I see that with The Chosen a lot. A lot of people have critiques with The Chosen for that. And like for the most part, like I think that's fine. Like be creative with your retellings of the story. Like stories are meant to be retold and adapted to address the circumstance. And there's only so much that you can do with children's media as well. I don't understand it, but you can't talk about a lot of other you can't talk about bad things. You've got to tone it down. I think there's got to be a way to teach the Bible to children without completely eliminating a lot of the content. But like at the same time, I get it, and like there's so many. I'm sure this was not a secular telling. I'm sure Esther prayed or like they talked to God and like
Yes.
yeah.
Multiple
So
times.
like I'm
She
sure
had a song about God. She talked about God
yeah.
tons.
Yeah, so like it's obviously this very Christianization of the story, which given the audience, given that VeggieTales is a very Christian media company, people, whatever they do, it makes sense that they would make this a Christian telling. They try to move away from the secular part of it, but it's interesting. I love thinking, like watching films, especially religion films, and asking myself, why does the director make this choice? Why do they do this and that? And with children's media, it's especially fun because they make a lot more choices away from the Bible, away from scholarship. But yeah, that sounds real exciting and really fun.
It was such a joy to rewatch, but I mean, sitting there after having read the actual Bible story, I was like, I mean, okay. It took me so long to realize Jesus was a Jew. I have to
Yeah,
say it because it
yeah,
took forever. They didn't mention that in church. I
right.
expressed that to my husband, and he didn't have a religious upbringing, and he's like, I knew that.
Yeah,
Like, okay, well, you knew that, but I was growing up in a bubble where they didn't like it had
yeah.
to be spelled out for me.
Has to be spelled out, and every story has to have a very distinct moral purpose. Like, we can't just have a story for a story's sake. A story has to, teach kids how to be a moral and good person and obedient.
Yeah.
But yeah, how fun! What a fun story of Esther. You know, with the caveat, with the little asterisk, except the genocide. But other than that, what a fun story of Esther. Um, I think I've said everything that I have to say for now before going into a big rant about something else regarding Esther. But do you have any closing thoughts?
I can't wait to revisit.
Oh yeah, it'll be
Yeah.
good.
So thank you guys for watching. Follow us on all
Mhm.
the socials. We're posting on multiple platforms. We got
Yeah,
us
we
on
are.
Apple, YouTube, Amazon, as well as Spotify.
Yeah, I think we're on all the major listening platforms. I will say, to get into the weeds of how we're doing this, we have like episodes on back order that we haven't released yet, but we've released our first episode between last week and this week, and it's been so exciting to like have that out in the world now. Woo, we're doing this. It's something happening. But yeah, feel free to reach out, send us a DM or email us, and with any questions or thoughts or disagreements, love to hear why I'm wrong because I probably am sometimes.
Like and subscribe.
All right, bye all.
Bye, guys. Are you going to go watch the VeggieTales version now?
Oh, I should for sure. Just
I
to
should. You should. And then I want your notes and I want to just discuss how wrong
definitely.
everything is.
Oh.